The cabin went dead silent. Captain Rowan Sterling stood over seat 1A, his face turning a violent shade of red. He pointed a trembling finger at the woman sitting there and shouted, "I don't care what that app says. You are not supposed to be here. Security is on the way." He thought he was protecting his aircraft. He thought he was asserting authority. But Captain Sterling had made a fatal calculation. He didn't know that the woman he was humiliating didn't just buy a first-class ticket. She had just signed the papers to buy the entire airline, and in about 20 minutes, his life was going to fall apart. The rain battered against the glass panels of JFK's Terminal 4, casting a grey, gloomy light over the waiting area near Gate B32. Inside the exclusive lounge, the atmosphere was hushed and expensive, smelling of espresso and old leather. But outside, at the general boarding gate for Flight 882 to London Heathrow, the mood was tense. The flight was delayed by 40 minutes, and the passengers were restless. Dr. Airline Vance adjusted the hood of her oversized grey sweatshirt. She looked nothing like the other passengers lining up for Group 1. While they wore bespoke suits, carried Toomey leather briefcases, and checked their Rolexes, Airline wore worn-out sneakers and carried a battered canvas rucksack. She had been coding for 36 hours straight in a hotel room in Manhattan, finalizing the acquisition of a lifetime. She was exhausted. She just wanted to sleep. She approached the gate agent, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, and held out her phone. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Vance," Sarah said, her eyes widening slightly as she saw the status on the screen. "VIP, board member priority." Sarah looked up, confused by Airline's attire, but trained well enough to smile. "Right this way. You're in 1A. Airline nodded, offering a tired smile. "Thanks, Sarah." She walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel waking her up slightly. She stepped onto the massive aircraft, a Boeing 777-300ER, and turned left toward the first-class cabin. This was where the trouble began. Standing at the galley, reviewing the manifest with a scowl, was Captain Rowan Sterling. Sterling was a veteran of the skies, 30 years with the airline, silver hair perfectly coiffed, his uniform pressed to military precision. He was a man who believed in order, hierarchy, and appearances. To him, first class was a sanctuary for the elite, the dignified, and the wealthy. He looked up as Airline stepped into the cabin. His eyes scanned her from her messy bun down to her scuffed sneakers. He didn't see a tech mogul who had just revolutionized aerospace logistics. He saw a girl who looked like she had gotten lost on her way to the economy backpacking section. Airline moved toward seat 1A, the most coveted spot on the plane. She tossed her canvas bag into the overhead bin and sat down, sighing as she sank into the plush leather. Sterling stepped out of the cockpit, his brow furrowed. He walked over to the lead flight attendant, Jessica, who was prepping the pre-flight champagne. "Jessica," Sterling whispered harshly. "Check that passenger's boarding pass again." Jessica looked over at Airline. "Who?" "1A. That's Dr. Vance. She's cleared, Captain." "She doesn't look cleared," Sterling muttered, staring at Airline, who had already put on noise-cancelling headphones and closed her eyes. "She looks like she slipped past the gate agent. We've had security breaches before, people buying economy tickets and sneaking up front." "I checked her in myself, Captain," Jessica said gently. "She's valid." "Check it again," Sterling commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I'm not having a stowaway in 1A disturbing Mr. Rothschild in 1B. We have high-value clients on this flight." Jessica sighed but nodded. She walked over to Airline and tapped her gently on the shoulder. Airline flinched, pulling off her headphones. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, Ma'am," Jessica said, embarrassed. "Could I just see your boarding pass one more time? There seems to be a discrepancy in the system." Airline frowned. She was tired, but she pulled up her phone again. "Sure. Jessica scanned it. The device beeped green. "Thank you, Dr. Vance. Again, I apologize." Jessica returned to the galley. "She's good, Captain. Valid ticket." Sterling wasn't satisfied. He had a gut feeling, a prejudice honed by years of judging books by their covers. He watched Elowen slouch down, putting her feet up on the ottoman. To him, it looked disrespectful. It looked like she didn't belong. "It's a glitch," Sterling decided. "System error. Someone hacked a mileage account. Look at her, Jessica. Does she look like she paid $15,000 for a seat?" "Captain, please," Jessica whispered. "We are boarding." "I'm the captain of this vessel," Sterling snapped. "I decide who is a threat to the safety and order of this flight." He straightened his tie and marched into the cabin. He didn't approach her with the customer service smile required by the airline. He approached her like a bouncer at a club. "Excuse me," Sterling said, loud enough that Mr. Rothschild in 1B looked up from his Wall Street Journal. Elowen opened one eye. "Yes?" "I need you to gather your things and return to the gate podium," Sterling said coldly. Elowen sat up, removing her headphones fully. "I'm sorry. Is there a problem with the plane?" "The plane is fine," Sterling said, looming over her. "The problem is that seat 1A is reserved for full-fare paying first-class passengers, not upgrades, and certainly not for staff travel or mileage errors." Elowen stared at him, genuinely confused. "I didn't use miles, and I'm not staff." "Don't lie to me," Sterling said, his voice rising. The passengers in business class were now craning their necks to see what was happening. "I've been flying for 30 years. I know a non-rev passenger when I see one. You're clearly in the wrong seat. Now, grab your bag, go back to the gate, and sort it out. If you have an economy ticket, go to your assigned seat. If not, get off." Elowen's confusion hardened into a cold calm. She had dealt with boardroom bullies, aggressive investors, and hostile media. She knew exactly what this was. "Captain," she said, her voice steady. "My name is Elowen Vance. I paid for this ticket. I have verified it with the gate agent and your flight attendant. I am not moving." Sterling's face flushed. He wasn't used to being told no, especially not by someone who looked like a college student. He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "Listen to me, young lady," he hissed. "I am the ultimate authority on this aircraft. When I give an order, it is federal law. You are disrupting my pre-flight procedures. Now move, or I will have you moved." Elowen didn't blink. She pulled out her phone and started typing a message. "Are you texting?" Sterling scoffed, incredulous. "I am giving you a direct order." "I'm texting my assistant," Elowen said, without looking up, "to tell him that Flight 882 is going to be delayed because the pilot is having a breakdown." That was it. The fuse was lit. The air in the cabin turned electric. Mr. Rothschild in 1B, a man who usually hated disruptions, was watching with keen interest. He sensed that the captain was making a mistake, but he stayed silent, curious to see how far Sterling would go. Sterling grabbed his radio. "Ops, this is Captain Sterling on 882. I have a disruptive passenger in first class refusing to follow crew instructions. I need airport police at the gate immediately." Jessica, the flight attendant, rushed forward, her face pale. "Captain, please. We can just downgrade her to business if you're that concerned." "Calling the police?" "She's refusing a direct order from the pilot in command," Sterling shouted, no longer caring about the other passengers. "That is a security threat. How do I know what's in that bag? How do I know she's who she says she is? She doesn't fit the profile." Elowen stood up. She wasn't tall, but she had a presence that suddenly filled the small space. "The profile?" Elowen repeated, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "What profile is that, Captain? The one where black women don't sit in first class? The one where hoodies aren't allowed in 1A? "This isn't about race," Sterling sputtered, defensive now. "It's about conduct, and your conduct is belligerent." "I was sitting in silence," Elowen countered. "You approached me. You harassed me. I am ensuring the integrity of this flight." Sterling turned to the cabin, addressing the gawking passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this delay. We have a passenger attempting to scam a first-class seat. We will be underway as soon as security removes her." A few passengers in the back murmured. Some pulled out their phones. The cameras were rolling. "You're making a mistake," Elowen said softly. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. A very expensive mistake. "The only mistake was letting you on this plane," Sterling sneered. 2 minutes later, heavy footsteps thudded down the jet bridge. 3 officers from the Port Authority Police Department boarded the plane. They looked serious, hands resting near their belts. "Captain?" the lead officer, Sergeant Miller, asked. "Right here," Sterling pointed at Elowen. "She's trespassing. She holds an invalid ticket and refuses to vacate the seat. I want her removed for failure to comply with crew instructions." Sergeant Miller looked at Elowen. He saw a small woman standing calmly amidst a furious pilot and terrified flight attendants. "Ma'am," Miller said, his tone professional. "Do you have a boarding pass?" "I do," Elowen said. She held up her phone again. Miller looked at it. Then he looked at the captain. "Captain, this scans as valid. Seat 1A. "It's a glitch," Sterling insisted, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Look at her. Does she look like she belongs here?" "She's probably using a stolen credit card. I'm telling you, as the pilot in command, I am denying her carriage. She is disruptive. I want her off my plane." Technically, the captain had the final say. If a pilot deemed a passenger a risk, even if that risk was fabricated by their own ego, the police had to enforce the removal. The legal battle would happen on the ground, not in the air. Sergeant Miller sighed. He looked at Elowen with sympathy. "Ma'am, the captain has refused you transport. You have to come with us. You can file a complaint with the airline later, but right now you have to leave the aircraft." Elowen looked at Sterling. He was smirking. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. He had won. He had put her in her place. Elowen picked up her canvas bag. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She looked at Jessica, the flight attendant. "What is your name?" Elowen asked. "Jessica, ma'am. Jessica Cole." "Thank you, Jessica. You tried to help." Then she turned to Sterling. She stepped close to him, so close he could smell the faint scent of expensive sandalwood perfume she wore. "Captain Rowan Sterling," she read from his name tag. "Employee number 4921. "That's right," Sterling gloated. "Write it down. Put it in your blog." "Nobody cares." "I'm not writing a blog," Elowen said. She pulled a business card from her pocket, a sleek, heavy black metal card with gold lettering, and tucked it into the breast pocket of Sterling's uniform. "Keep that," she said. "You're going to need the number on it to call your lawyer." She turned and walked off the plane, flanked by the police officers. As she exited the jet bridge, Sterling turned to the cabin, clapping his hands together. "All right, folks, show's over. Let's get this bird in the air." Service as usual. He felt powerful. He felt vindicated. He went into the cockpit and sat down, checking his instruments. He didn't look at the card she had put in his pocket. If he had, he would have seen the logo embossed in gold. It wasn't just a business card. It was an executive access card for Aurora Holdings, the parent company that had just finalized the buyout of the airline 3 hours ago. And the name on the card read, Dr. Elowen Vance, chairwoman and majority shareholder. Sterling taxied the plane onto the runway, thinking the problem was behind him. But inside the terminal, Elowen Vance wasn't going to customer service. She was going to the operations tower, and she was about to ground the entire flight. Sergeant Miller was confused. Usually when a pilot kicks a passenger off a plane, the passenger is either screaming, crying, or demanding to see a manager at the ticket counter. Dr. Elowen Vance was doing none of those things. She was walking with a terrifying sense of purpose, not toward the exit, but toward the secure service elevators near the center of the terminal. "Ma'am," Miller said, picking up his pace to match hers. "The exit is that way. You need to rebook your ticket at the landside counters." Elowen stopped at a grey metal door marked "Restricted Area, Authorized Personnel and Flight Crew Only." She turned to the officer. "Sergeant, you did your job. You followed the protocol dictated by the pilot in command," Elowen said calmly. "But now, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to escort me up to the Operations Control Center on the 4th floor." Miller blinked. "The OCC? Ma'am, that's high security. Even I need clearance to get in there. You can't just walk in and complain." "I'm not going to complain," Elowen said. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. She put it on speaker. The phone rang twice before a gruff, familiar voice answered. "This is Bradley." James Bradley was the outgoing CEO of the airline, the man who had just sold his life's work to Elowen's conglomerate. "James," Elowen said. "It's Elowen Vance. I'm at JFK." "Elowen!" Bradley's voice shifted instantly to a tone of deferential respect. "We weren't expecting you at the HQ until tomorrow morning for the press conference. Is everything all right? Did the car meet you?" "No, James. I'm currently standing in front of the secure access door to the OCC at Terminal 4 with 3 police officers who think I'm a vagrant," Elowen said, her eyes locked on Miller's stunned face. "Your captain on Flight 882 just removed me from the aircraft for suspicious conduct. Apparently I don't look like I can afford first class." There was a silence on the line, so profound it felt like the air pressure in the hallway had dropped. He did what?" Bradley stammered. "He kicked me off, James, publicly, humiliatingly. I need you to call the station manager, Marco Thorne, and tell him to open this door, and tell him I'm coming up to take command of the situation." "I'm calling Thorne on the other line right now," Bradley said, his voice trembling with fury. "Elowen, I am so sorry. I'll have that pilot's head on a platter." "Save it," Elowen said. "Just get the door open." She hung up. 10 seconds later, the heavy magnetic lock on the grey door buzzed and clicked open. Standing there was Marco Thorne, the director of ground operations at JFK. He was a large man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He held a phone to his ear, his face pale. "Dr. Vance?" Thorne asked, looking at the woman in the hoodie. "Mr. Thorne?" Elowen nodded. "Shall we?" She walked past him, the police officers following, now looking very unsure of themselves. The Operations Control Center was the nerve center of the airport. Dozens of screens covered the walls, showing weather patterns, flight paths, gate assignments, and maintenance logs. Dispatchers spoke in hushed tones into headsets. When Elowen walked in, the room fell quiet. Thorne clapped his hands. "Everyone, eyes up! This is Dr. Elowen Vance. As of 4 p.m. today, she is the chairwoman of the board and the new owner of this airline. You will give her your full attention." A gasp rippled through the room. The dispatchers looked at the young woman in sneakers who now owned their paychecks. Elowen walked over to the main console, where the tracking map for the Atlantic routes was displayed. "Where is Flight 882? She asked. A dispatcher typed furiously. Flight 882, taxiing to runway 31 left, currently 4th in line for takeoff." Elowen watched the small blip on the screen. That blip contained Captain Sterling, a man who felt safe inside his metal fortress. "Get me the tower frequency," Elowen said, "and get me a direct line to the cockpit." "Dr. Vance," Thorne said gently, "if we recall the flight now, we'll miss our slot. The delay will push the crew over their duty hours. We'll have to cancel the flight. It will cost the airline roughly $200,000 in compensation, fuel, and rebooking fees." Elowen turned to Thorne. Her eyes were hard. "Mr. Thorne, Captain Sterling demonstrated a gross abuse of power based on bias and ego. He violated the core value of this company, respect. If he is willing to break protocol to humiliate a passenger he doesn't like, what other protocols is he skipping? Is he skipping safety checks? Is he ignoring fuel calculations?" She pointed at the screen. "I don't care if it costs $2 million. You don't put a price on integrity. Bring that plane back." Thorne swallowed hard. He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." He picked up the headset. "Tower, this is Airline Ops. We have an emergency recall for Flight 882. Cancel takeoff clearance immediately. Return to gate." Inside the cockpit of the Boeing 787, the mood was light. Captain Sterling was feeling excellent. He had asserted his dominance, cleared the riffraff from his premium cabin, and was about to embark on a 7-hour flight to London. "Did you see the look on her face?" Sterling chuckled, adjusting the throttle levers. "Thought she could just sit there with her headphones on. Unbelievable." The first officer, David, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. David was younger, sharper, and much less prejudiced. He had checked the passenger manifest earlier and noticed the VIP tag, but Sterling had shouted him down before he could mention it. "Captain," David said cautiously, "I really think we should have double-checked with Ops before offloading her. The manifest had a priority code I didn't recognize." "Relax, David," Sterling scoffed. "I've been doing this since you were in diapers. You have to trust your gut. My gut said she was trouble, probably a stolen identity. We saved the company a headache." Rain lashed against the windshield. The runway lights blurred in the distance. "Airline 882 Tower," the radio crackled. "Cancel takeoff clearance. I repeat, cancel takeoff clearance." Sterling frowned, pressing the transmit button. "Tower 882. We are number 1 for departure. Engines are spooled. What's the issue? Weather?" "Negative 882, the air traffic controller replied, sounding confused himself. "We have a mandatory recall order from your company operations. You are to clear the runway immediately and return to gate B32. Sterling froze. "Company operations? Did we miss a bag? Is there a maintenance light?" "They didn't specify, Captain. Just that it is an urgent executive order. Clear the runway now." Sterling slammed his hand on the console. "Unbelievable! Probably that girl made a fuss, and now they want us to go back and pick up her luggage. Incompetent ground staff." He grabbed the PA microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. It seems the folks on the ground have made a paperwork error. We are being forced to return to the gate. I apologize for the incompetence of the ground team. We should be back on our way shortly." In the cabin, groans erupted. Mr. Rothschild in 1B checked his watch and sighed loudly. Jessica, the flight attendant, felt a pit in her stomach. She knew this wasn't a paperwork error. The massive plane turned around. It taxied slowly back toward the terminal, looking like a defeated beast. As they pulled up to gate B32, Sterling saw something unusual through the side window. Usually, the jet bridge is empty except for the operator. Today there was a crowd. He saw Marco Thorne, the station manager. He saw the head of HR, and he saw 2 airport police officers, not the ones who took Elowen away, but higher-ranking officers. "What is going on?" Sterling muttered. He set the parking brake and shut down the engines. "David, Finish the shutdown checklist, Sterling barked. I'm going to go give Thorne a piece of my mind. Sterling grabbed his hat and jacket. He opened the cockpit door and stormed into the galley. Jessica was already opening the main cabin door. The jet bridge extended and locked into place. The door swung open. Sterling stepped forward, his chest puffed out. Thorne, what is the meaning of this? You realize you've just burned 10 tons of fuel for— Captain Sterling, Thorne cut him off. His voice was icy. Step off the aircraft. Excuse me? Sterling blinked. I have a flight to fly. Not anymore, Thorne said. You are relieved of duty effectively immediately. Grab your flight bag. On whose authority? Sterling shouted, his face turning purple. I am the senior captain on this base. You can't pull me off a flight without the chief pilot's sign-off. I signed off on it. A voice came from behind Thorne. The group parted. Dr. Elowen Vance stepped forward. She had lowered her hood. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a sharp, intelligent face. She held the black metal business card Sterling had ignored earlier. Sterling looked at her, then at Thorne, then back at her. His brain struggled to compute what he was seeing. You? Sterling laughed nervously. You came back? What, did you call your daddy? Elowen stepped onto the plane, crossing the threshold so she was standing toe-to-toe with him in the galley. The first-class passengers were leaning forward, listening to every word. I didn't call my father, Rowan, Elowen said, using his first name with deliberate condescension. I called the board of directors. She turned the business card over in her fingers. You see, about 3 hours ago, my company, Aurora Holdings, acquired a 51% controlling stake in this airline. I am the new chairwoman. I am your boss's boss's boss. The color drained from Sterling's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. That's impossible, he whispered. I'm what? Elowen raised an eyebrow. Too young? Too black? Too dressed down? She stepped closer. You humiliated me because of your own bias. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about the fact that you delayed 300 people, wasted thousands of dollars of fuel, and embarrassed this company because you couldn't handle seeing someone who didn't fit your worldview sitting in seat 1A. Elowen turned to the police officers. Please escort Mr. Sterling off my property. He is trespassing. You can't do this, Sterling stammered, panic finally setting in. I have a union. I have rights. You have a hearing on Monday, Elowen said coldly. But until then, you are suspended without pay. Now get off my plane. Sterling looked around for support. He looked at Jessica, but she looked away. He looked at David, the first officer, who was busy pretending to read a manual. He looked at Mr. Rothschild in 1B. Rothschild took a sip of his champagne and said loud enough for everyone to hear, Good riddance. Defeated, Sterling grabbed his bag. His hands were shaking. As he walked up the jet bridge, past the crew he had bullied and the woman he had underestimated, the silence was louder than any scream. Elowen turned to the cabin. She took the PA mic from the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Vance. I am the new owner of this airline. I want to personally apologize for the behavior of the former captain. It does not reflect the values we will uphold moving forward. We have a new flight crew on standby who will be here in 10 minutes. Open bar is on the house for the entire flight, in every cabin. Thank you for your patience. The cabin erupted in applause. Elowen handed the mic to Jessica. He's all yours. But the drama wasn't over. Sterling wasn't the type to go down quietly. He was about to make one final desperate move that would seal his fate forever. Rowan Sterling didn't go home. He didn't reflect on his actions. He sat in the airport bar at Terminal 4, 3 martinis deep, his hands shaking with a mixture of rage and humiliation. In his mind, He was the victim. He was a veteran pilot who had been publicly castrated by a woke corporate agenda. He convinced himself that Airline Vance wasn't actually the owner. She was just some diversity hire executive throwing her weight around. He pulled out his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to his union representative, a bulldog of a man named Frank Russo. The second was to a reporter at a tabloid news station known for sensationalizing worker rights stories. "I've been wrongfully terminated," Sterling slurred into the phone. "I followed security protocol, and they fired me because I questioned a minority passenger. It's reverse discrimination, Frank. I want to sue. I want millions." By the next morning, the story had broken. But not the way Sterling intended. While Sterling was giving a tearful, victimized interview to the tabloid news crew in his living room, claiming he was just trying to keep the skies safe, the internet was busy doing what it does best, uncovering the truth. Remember the passengers in the back of the plane? The teenagers and the tech-savvy millennials? They had been recording. A video titled "Racist Pilot vs. New Airline Owner" hit TikTok and Twitter at 9 a.m. By 10 a.m., it had 4 million views. The video was damning. It showed the entire interaction clearly. It showed Airline sitting quietly, minding her own business. It showed Sterling looming over her, shouting, "Does she look like she paid $15,000? It captured the collective gasp of the cabin when Sterling called the police. And most importantly, it captured the crisp, clear audio of Airline revealing her identity on the jet bridge and Sterling's subsequent sputtering panic. The comment section was a bloodbath. "Imagine firing your own boss, Nyato Karma." The way he looked at her shoes, "This guy is a dinosaur. Get him out of the sky." "I was on this flight. He delayed us for an hour because of his ego. The free champagne was nice, though." Airline sat in the executive boardroom of the airline's headquarters in downtown Manhattan. The room was all glass and steel, overlooking the city. At the long oak table sat the entire board of directors, the legal team, and Marco Thorne. On the screen at the end of the room, Sterling's interview was playing on mute. He looked pathetic, wiping away fake tears. "He's suing for $10 million, the general counsel said, tossing a thick file onto the table. "Defamation, wrongful termination, emotional distress. He's claiming you staged the event to make him look bad." Airline didn't look up from her tablet. She was scrolling through the flight data from Sterling's history. "Let him sue," Airline said calmly. "In fact, I want him to sue. It makes what I'm about to do much more legally defensible." "What are you going to do, Airline?" Thorne asked. "We've already fired him." "Firing him is just an administrative action," Airline said. She looked up, her eyes cold. "I'm looking at his fuel logs for the last 5 years. Did you know Captain Sterling has a habit of padding his fuel stats? He consistently takes 10% more fuel than recommended because he doesn't trust the computer models. That's cost this airline $3 million in wasted fuel over his career." She swiped to the next screen. "And look at his HR file. 5 complaints in 10 years, all from female co-pilots or flight attendants. Condescending, aggressive, refused to listen to safety input. And every single one of these complaints was buried by the old management." Airline stood up. "He wants a fight? He wants to make this public? Fine. We're not just going to fire him. We're going to revoke his license. We're going to countersue for damages caused by the delay. And we're going to release the internal investigation of his entire career to the FAA." She looked at the general counsel. "Call his lawyer. Tell them we accept the meeting. Tell Sterling to come here, to this office, tomorrow morning. I want to look him in the eye when his life ends." The conference room felt like a courtroom. On one side sat Rowan Sterling and Frank Russo, his union rep. Sterling looked smug. He had seen the support from the fringe groups online who believed his story. He thought the airline would settle. He thought they would pay him to go away quietly. On the other side sat Elowen Vance, Marco Thorne, and a team of 4 high-priced corporate lawyers. "Let's make this quick," Russo started, leaning back in his chair. "My client was humiliated. He was acting in the interest of safety. We want full back pay, reinstatement of his pension, and a $5 million settlement for the damage to his reputation. If you don't agree, we go to court, and we drag this airline through the mud." Sterling nodded, crossing his arms. "You can't just buy an airline and treat veterans like trash, little girl." Elowen didn't flinch at the insult. She simply pressed a button on the console in front of her. The lights dimmed, and the massive screen on the wall flickered to life. "Mr. Sterling," Elowen said, "before we discuss your settlement, we need to review some evidence." The screen didn't show the viral video. It showed CCTV footage from the airport terminal. "This is from yesterday," Elowen narrated, "after you were escorted off the plane." The video showed Sterling walking to the bar. Then it showed him making phone calls. Then, shockingly, it showed him meeting with a man in a dark coat near the restrooms. Sterling handed the man a small envelope. The man handed Sterling a thick packet of cash. Sterling's face went pale. That's nothing. That's a personal debt." "That man," Elowen said, "is a known contact for a supplier of black market aviation parts. We've been tracking him for months." The room went deadly silent. Even Russo, the union rep, looked at his client with shock. "What is she talking about, Rowan?" Russo whispered. "We did a full audit of your flight history last night, Rowan," Elowen continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "We found that on your long-haul flights to Asia, you've been transporting small packages in your personal flight bag that were never screened. You used your rank to bypass random checks. Smuggling, Rowan? On my planes?" "That's a lie," Sterling shouted, standing up. "You're fabricating evidence." "We have the logs," Elowen said. "We have the testimony from the flight attendants you bullied into silence. And now, we have the video." She leaned forward. "Here is the counteroffer. You will drop your lawsuit immediately. You will resign, effectively yesterday. You will surrender your pilot's license voluntarily. And you will pay back the $200,000 cost of the flight cancellation you caused." "Or what?" Sterling sneered, though his voice was trembling. "You'll go to the police?" "I already have," Elowen said. The doors to the conference room opened. 2 federal agents from the FBI stepped in, followed by Sergeant Miller from the airport police. "Rowan Sterling," the lead agent said, "we have a warrant for your arrest regarding interstate smuggling and fraud." Sterling looked at Russo. "Frank, do something." Russo closed his briefcase and stood up. He looked at Sterling with disgust. "The union protects pilots, Rowan, not criminals. You're on your own." Sterling looked at Elowen. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes, only fear, pure, unadulterated fear. "Dr. Vance," he stammered. "Please, I have a family. I have a mortgage. I made a mistake." Elowen stood up, smoothing her hoodie. She was still wearing casual clothes, a final power move to show she didn't need a suit to destroy him. "You didn't make a mistake, Rowan. You made a choice. You chose to judge me based on how I looked. You chose to abuse your power. And when you got caught, you chose to lie." She turned her back on him. "Get him out of my building." As the agents handcuffed Sterling and led him out, he looked back one last time. He saw the little girl in the sneakers standing at the head of the table, commanding the respect of the most powerful people in the room. He realized then, as the cuffs clicked tight, that he hadn't just lost a job. He had lost everything, and he had done it all to himself. Elowen waited until the door closed. She let out a long breath. The room was silent. "So," she said, looking at the board, "now that the trash has been taken out, shall we discuss the expansion into the European market?" The board members nodded vigorously. No one dared to disagree with her. 1 year later, the morning sun over John F. Kennedy International Airport didn't just illuminate the tarmac, it seemed to scrub it clean. Inside Terminal 4, the air was different. The anxiety that used to hang over the gate areas, the fear of hidden fees, aggressive staff, and arbitrary rules, had evaporated, replaced by a hum of efficient, quiet confidence. Dr. Elowen Vance walked through the concourse, a travel mug of green tea in her hand. She wasn't flanked by bodyguards. She wasn't wearing a power suit that cost more than a Honda Civic. She wore dark jeans, clean white sneakers, and a navy blazer over a simple grey t-shirt. To the unobservant eye, she looked like a graduate student heading to a lecture. To the 15,000 employees of Aurora Atlantic Airlines, she was the woman who had saved them from themselves. She stopped at gate B32. It was the anniversary. Exactly 1 year ago to the hour. She had sat in seat 1A on this very spot, humiliated by a man who believed his stripes gave him the right to judge her worth. Today, the gate area was bright and welcoming. The old scuffed carpet had been replaced with sleek hardwood flooring. The rigid metal seats were gone, swapped for ergonomic lounge chairs with charging ports. But the biggest change wasn't the furniture. It was the people. Elowen watched from a distance as a young gate agent, a guy named Leo with tattoos on his forearms and a bright smile, helped an elderly woman who was confused about her boarding group. Under the old regime, Leo would have been reprimanded for the tattoos and told to process the passenger in under 45 seconds or face a write-up. "Take your time, ma'am," Leo was saying, gently guiding her hand to the scanner. "We aren't going anywhere until you're comfortable. Let me grab your carry-on for you." Elowen smiled. The Sterling doctrine is dead, she thought. Long live the Vance philosophy. "You're doing it again," a voice said beside her. Elowen turned to see Jessica Cole standing there. Jessica looked striking. Gone was the terrified flight attendant who had been forced to apologize for a captain's tyranny. In her place stood the director of customer experience. Her uniform was tailored, her posture commanding, and on her lapel sat a gold pin in the shape of the company's new logo, the Aurora. "Doing what?" Elowen asked. "Lurking," Jessica teased. "You know you have an office with a panoramic view, right? You don't have to patrol the terminals." "I like the ground," Elowen replied, watching a Boeing 787 push back from the gate. "The view from the top is only good if the foundation is solid. How are the load factors for the London flight?" "Oversold by 2, Jessica said, checking her tablet. "But we handled it. We asked for volunteers, offered them $800 vouchers and a night at the TWA hotel. We had 5 people fighting for the vouchers. No police called, no drama." "Good," Elowen nodded. "And the pilot?" Jessica's expression softened. "Captain Hernandez. She's one of the new hires from the diversity initiative you launched. Top of her class at Embry-Riddle. She's already completed her pre-flight checks and personally greeted every passenger in first class." "Personally?" "She shook their hands," Jessica said. "She told me she wanted them to know who was flying them. She said she wanted to make sure everyone felt safe." Elowen felt a lump in her throat. It was working. The toxin that Rowan Sterling had injected into the veins of this airline had been flushed out. "It's funny," Elowen mused, looking out at the runway. "I almost want to thank him." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Thank who? Sterling?" "If he hadn't been such a monster that day," Elowen said quietly, "I might have just been a passive investor." I might have let the old management keep running things into the ground. His arrogance was the catalyst. He destroyed himself, but he saved this airline. Jessica looked at the empty jet bridge, the ghost of the past lingering for a split second. Well, I hope he's enjoying his retirement. Elowen checked her watch. I doubt enjoying is the word for it. 300 miles north, the world was not bright, and it was certainly not efficient. The Federal Correctional Institution at Otisville was a low-security facility, often mocked in the press as a country club for white-collar criminals. But for inmate, War0054, formerly known as Captain Rowan Sterling, there was no luxury here. There was only the crushing, grey weight of irrelevance. Sterling sat on the edge of his bunk. The mattress was 2 inches thick, smelling faintly of mildew and industrial disinfectant. His back ached constantly now, a dull, throbbing reminder of 30 years sitting in a cockpit, now aggravated by 6 hours a day of mopping linoleum floors. He looked at his hands. They were dry, the skin around his knuckles cracked and red. These hands used to command a $300 million machine. They used to sign autographs for kids who wanted to see the cockpit. They used to hold glasses of Dom Perignon in 5-star hotels in Tokyo and Paris. Now they held a mop bucket handle. "Sterling!" A guard's voice boomed down the hallway, bouncing off the concrete walls. "Inspection in 5. Get that rack tight." Sterling flinched. He stood up slowly, his knees popping. He began to smooth the coarse grey wool blanket over his bed, aligning the corners with obsessive precision. Old habits died hard. He tucked the sheets with military exactness, the same way he used to check his flaps and slats. It had been a brutal year. The fall hadn't been a slide, it had been a nose dive. After his arrest in the boardroom, his life had disintegrated with terrifying speed. The FBI raid on his home had been televised. The neighbors, people he had barbecued with for 20 years, stood on their lawns and watched as agents carried out boxes of flight logs, undeclared cash, and illegal contraband. Then came the divorce. His wife, Martha, hadn't even come to the jail. She sent a lawyer. She took the house in Long Island. She took the boat. She took the dog. She told the press she had no idea about his side business, smuggling parts, painting herself as another victim of his deception. Maybe she was right. Sterling had lied to everyone, even himself. But the worst part wasn't the loss of money. It was the loss of status. In prison, nobody cared that he had 20,000 flight hours. To the other inmates, he was just an arrogant old man who talked too much. "Hey, Captain!" a voice sneered from the doorway. It was heavy-set inmate named Miller, a former stockbroker doing time for insider trading. Miller liked to torment Sterling. "What do you want, Miller?" Sterling muttered, not looking up from his bed-making. "I saw the news in the rec room." Miller leaned against the doorframe, chewing on a toothpick. "Your old airline just posted record profits. Stock is up 40%. Sterling froze. His hands clenched the grey wool blanket. "And get this," Miller chuckled, enjoying the cruelty. "That girl? The one you tried to toss? She was on the cover of Forbes this morning. The new queen of the skies, they called her. Said she revolutionized the industry by removing toxic leadership. That's you, isn't it, Rick? You're the toxic leadership." Sterling turned around, his face flushing a mottled red. "Get out of my cell." "Touched a nerve, huh?" Miller laughed. "You know, I flew that airline last week to get here for my surrender date. Service was great. They gave me a warm cookie. You never gave out cookies, did you, Rick? You just gave out attitude." "I kept my passengers safe," Sterling snapped, his voice cracking. "I was a professional." "You were a smuggler," Miller reminded him cold-heartedly. "And a bully. And now You're the janitor. Don't miss a spot on the floor today, Captain. The warden is doing rounds." Miller walked away, whistling. Sterling sank back onto his bunk, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt like he couldn't breathe. The walls of the cell felt like they were closing in, tighter than any cockpit. He closed his eyes and tried to summon the feeling of takeoff, the thrust, the lift, the moment the wheels leave the ground. But he couldn't feel it anymore. All he could feel was the cold concrete and the shame. Back at JFK, the sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the tarmac. The anniversary celebration was moving to the main hangar. A stage had been set up beneath the nose of the airline's newest aircraft, a flagship Airbus A350, painted in the shimmering Aurora livery. Hundreds of employees were gathered. Champagne flutes clinked, not just for the executives, but for the baggage handlers, the mechanics, and the cleaning crews. It was a party for everyone. Elowen stood off to the side, watching the festivities. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Marco Thorne, the station manager who had opened the door for her that fateful day. He looked 10 years younger. The stress lines were gone, replaced by a relaxed demeanor. "You realized we pulled it off, right?" Thorne said, clinking his glass against hers. "A year ago, I was updating my resume. I thought this place was going under." "It takes a village, Marco," Elowen said. "I just provided the checkbook and the direction. You all did the work." "We did the work because we finally had a leader worth following," Thorne corrected her. He gestured to the plane behind them. "You know, the pilots are calling this ship the Spirit of Elowen." Elowen laughed, shaking her head. "Absolutely not. No naming planes after me. That's an ego trap. We name them after explorers, scientists, dreamers, not CEOs." Thorne smiled. "Fair enough. But there is one piece of business we need to handle. A bit of closure." He pulled a small framed photograph from his jacket pocket. It was a picture that had hung in the crew lounge for 15 years. It was a portrait of Rowan Sterling, standing proudly in front of a jet, grinning with that untouchable arrogance. "We found this in the back of a storage closet," Thorne said. "The cleaners didn't know what to do with it. Throw it out? Burn it?" Elowen took the photo. She looked at Sterling's face. She remembered the way he had looked at her hoodie, the sneer, the absolute certainty that he was better than her. She didn't feel anger anymore. She felt pity. "Don't burn it," Elowen said. "Really?" Thorne asked, surprised. "Keep it," she said, handing it back. "Put it in the training center museum, in the section on historical mistakes." Thorne let out a loud laugh. "That is cold, Elowen. I love it." "It's not cold," Elowen said, her eyes serious. "It's a lesson. Future pilots need to see him. They need to know that technical skill means nothing if your character is flawed. Let him be a warning. That's the only legacy he deserves." Later that night, the hangar emptied out. The party was over. The cleaning crews were sweeping up the confetti. Elowen walked out onto the tarmac one last time. The night air was cool and smelled of jet fuel, a scent she had come to love. She looked up at the sky. It was a clear night, the stars visible even above the light pollution of New York City. A plane was taking off, its strobes flashing rhythmically as it climbed into the darkness, banking east toward London. It was Flight 882. The same flight number. But everything else had changed. Inside that plane, she knew, was a diverse crew working in harmony. There were passengers in first class wearing suits and passengers wearing hoodies, and no one was questioning their right to be there. Elowen took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the cool air. She pulled her phone out and typed a quick text to her assistant. Message. The anniversary event was perfect. Let's focus on the Asia expansion tomorrow. 8 a.m. meeting. Don't be late. She put the phone away, zipped up her grey hoodie, and walked toward her car. She didn't look back at the terminal. She didn't need to. She knew it was running perfectly. Far away, in a dark cell, Rowan Sterling lay awake, listening to the distant rumble of that same jet engine fading into the night. He rolled over, facing the concrete wall, and finally, for the first time in a year, he cried. Not for his job or his money, but for the realization that the world had moved on without him, soaring higher than he ever could. The karma hadn't just hit him, it had grounded him, while the object of his prejudice touched the stars. Talk about a turbulence you didn't see coming. Captain Sterling learned the hard way that when you judge a book by its cover, sometimes that book turns around and throws the entire library at you. He let his ego and prejudice write checks that his career couldn't cash, and Dr. Elowen Vance was there to collect the debt with interest. It just goes to show, you never truly know who you're dealing with. Treat everyone, from the CEO to the janitor, with the same level of respect. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because you never know when karma is waiting in the wings to serve up a slice of humble pie. What do you think? Did Sterling get what he deserved? Or was 5 years in prison too harsh? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of epic payback and justice served at 30,000 feet, please smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder to be kind, and hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story of instant karma. Thanks for watching, and stay humble out there.